This is my organization, Center for Donation and Transplant. We have a website, www.donatelifecdt.org. We have a Facebook page if you're on Facebook. So if you are, please like us. We're trying to get our like counts up, and we'll do anything to get them up. So, and we also have a Twitter too. So we have all kinds of great stories. We're basically what's called an organ procurement organization. We're one of 58 in the United States. Basically in the 70s, the government made a real push for organ donation. There was a lot of people who had kidney disease. They were on dialysis. When you're on dialysis, it's very costly and the outcomes aren't that great. So they said, how can we improve outcomes and reduce costs? And they said, let's try organ donation. So at the time, though, they didn't have a way of enabling donation. So what they basically did was they took the country, they cut it into a jigsaw puzzle and assigned regions to different organ procurement organizations. And the Center for Donation and Transplant, CDT, we abbreviate, is one of those. So we go from Burlington, Vermont, all the way down to Binghamton and Catskill, and then we go from Western Massachusetts all the way to Utica, New York. So we have a huge region. There's 43 hospitals in that area. We're responsible for organ and tissue procurement and allocation. And our main goal is to ensure that any family or patient who has the opportunity to donate either organs and tissues, that their option to donate is preserved. So just make sure families or patients are asked. It's their decision to say yes or no. We're going to get a lot of facts tonight, and we're also going to see the real faces of donation with our tissue donor and organ donor families. We'll talk about tissue donation to start. We're just going to have a short video first.
Michelle had called me one day and she said that she had noticed a bump in Chase's arm. And he was very active in gymnastics, and so we really didn't think too much about it. But after a week or so, it really hadn't changed. We took Chase in and took the x-rays with us, and he left the room and was probably gone about 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And when he come back in the room, you could tell by his face that he did not have good news.
Chase turned 9, and the following day was diagnosed with osteosarcoma.
I had my suspicions at that time, and those were confirmed by a biopsy a few days later that he had osteosarcoma in his radius. Osteosarcoma is a bone cancer. This was a fairly large tumor in a pretty small arm. We initially had some discussions about doing an amputation, and after several long conversations, we decided that we would make an attempt to do what we call a limb salvage procedure, which is to take the tumor out and leave the hand and arm behind. The problem was reconstructing to give Chase an arm that he could have good function with. We had a large defect in one of the 2 bones in his forearm. Was missing about 2/3 of the length of that bone.
When I went into the surgery room, I was kind of scared because I thought I was going to lose my arm.
Walking into the operating room to operate on a 9-year-old boy, I have to check my emotions and everything at the door. I have to be a technician when I come in there, and we go into the operating room, and I'm looking at this arm, and I have a picture in my head of what my plan is.
The surgical nurse said, "I'll call you every hour," in the waiting room. And I believe it was the 6th hour the phone rang, and I'll never forget. She said, "I have really, really, really good news." And I knew after 3 reallys she wasn't going to tell me anything I predicted. She said, "We've started the limb salvage."
After removing the tumor, we did feel as if we'd done a safe surgery by using donated bone. From the bone bank, we were able to reconstruct and give him an arm that provides him with considerably better function than he ever could have had with a prosthetic limb after an amputation.
We knew through the years that organs and eyes and things like that were donated, but we had no idea that people actually donated tissue and bones. Dr. McGarry gave us the option of taking the cancer-fied bone out and transplanting a bone that someone had donated.
We had hoped for similar function, basically pinchers like a prosthetic would have. And we came out with an arm that has 5 fingers that move. He writes his name, he throws a ball, he plays video games, he rides a 4-wheeler.
We had no idea that that was even possible. We always knew about the organ donors and all that kind of stuff, but we really didn't have any idea about becoming a bone donor.
When I woke up, as soon as I did, I looked down, and my mom was coming up in the elevator. I looked at my arm, then looked at Mom. I said, "Mom, look," and all 5 fingers moved.
I can't tell you the hope that gives you and the feeling that gives you.
Chase has almost full function back now.
It's interesting how a PlayStation 3 becomes physical therapy.
It's done wonders for his fingers and thumb.
Now I can play basketball, baseball, ride my bike, my scooter, go swimming. Me and Dad were going outside, and I asked him if we could play catch. And when I threw it, it went right over Dad's head.
At this point, I can't imagine there's going to be much that's going to ever hold him back in life. And that's why we are so appreciative of the choices that people make. It doesn't affect just the person receiving, it affects the whole family.
One person donating their bones or their body after they're gone can help up to 50 people. We were faced with a loss. Now we are faced with a miracle that we look at every day, and thank God somebody had the forethought to donate their body, their bones, their tissue to someone else who can use them. Thank you.
It's a great legacy for them to leave behind for their loved one. I'd like to say thank you to people that say yes to becoming a donor, a tissue donor, a bone donor. And thank you to MTF for making my child's future look very bright.
At least in our area, there's hundreds of donors every year, and the impact they have on people's lives, giving them mobility back, quality of life back, you can't quantify that. It's something that's incredible. And now we have a local family here from Margaretville who will share their story.
I'm Deb Cohen. Hi. You all know my brother, Danny. Didn't really know what I was going to say. And Danny died suddenly. It's not time to say anything, say goodbye, count up loose ends, whatever. And so we were really shocked when we learned that he was a donor, and incredibly proud. And it gave us something to kind of hold on to and be proud of in that moment when we didn't have him to talk to. Danny was just shy of 60 years old, and I think our reaction was, you know, what could be of benefit from a 60-year-old body, right? And we were amazed. We got a letter from the nurse in charge that over 300 people have been helped. And I know I was so inspired, I immediately went home and I got online and I became a donor. I just had no idea my brother had done that. I've encouraged everyone since to do it. There was a flag that was flown over the hospital to honor him. And we didn't know. So we all got in the car when we found out, and we drove over here and we just sat and looked at him. It was Danny's life. I mean, who he was, you all know him, knew him. He was huge in life, and this just carried further who he really was. So we took pictures of it, and we stood. It was Zeb and Amber, Kathy, his wife, his son, his daughter, their families, and we just were so proud. And I believe we have the flag, right? It was given to Kathy. So we still have that flag. I think it's just to have a memory of him and know that when I saw that little boy, I mean, I knew things like that happened, but when I saw it, I was crying because I know there are people out there that are thanking Danny right now. So thank you for this opportunity to share what it meant for us.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's incredibly moving. You know, it personifies donation and how one incredible life can still give life to others in a whole new way, even when they're gone. So thank you for sharing that. It's very special. So now that we've had a story from a tissue donor family, I just wanted to quickly go through what types of tissues can actually be donated. So we'll start with bone. It can be used for reconstruction of shattered limbs. You can obviously imagine how this gives people strength. It allows them enhanced mobility and just a whole new level of quality of life if they've been previously injured. It can strengthen backs distorted by scoliosis. If you ever met somebody who has scoliosis, the spine, it'll twist like that. They can actually use donor bone to help correct that. So those are some of the uses of bone. As you saw in the video, they can use it to help replace cancerous bone tumors, areas left over when the tumors are removed. Replacement of hip bones, they can take a donor hip, they can take an actual x-ray of the recipient's own hip or pelvis and use a computer machine to machine that hip bone to fit exactly into the recipient's. Dental reconstruction surgery, if you ever had major dental work, chances are you might have some donor bone in your mouth. And over 50 people alone can benefit from one bone donor. Skin, it's utilized for burn surgeries, urological procedures, and reconstructive surgeries. The thickness of the skin that they take from a donor is about the same thickness as a blister, so it's not disfiguring. For people who are severely burned, skin can actually save their lives because it keeps them hydrated and it keeps them from getting infections. So skin can actually save lives. Cartilage, used in knee surgery and facial reconstruction, and in joint injuries for improved mobility. So we all know people who have leg injuries, knee injuries, and we all can see how they're limited in their life. So cartilage is just one of those things that restores their mobility and allows them that greater quality of life. Tendon, the same type of thing. Cartilage and tendon, there are no substitutes that are as good as natural tissue. There's artificial substances that they can put in there, artificial grafts, but natural donor tissues work much better. So tendon, again, restores mobility. Saphenous vein it's a long vein in the leg. It's a primary vein recovered during a transplant. What they most commonly use it for is cardiac bypass surgeries, and it can actually prevent amputations in people with chronic circulation problems. Like we talked about skin before, how it can save people's lives. Heart valves can do the same thing. About 2/3 of them go to children that are less than 15 years old. So these are children that are born with some type of heart defect. They need the heart valves to grow properly to be healthy. So these are actually a life-saving kind of graft. So they're put in during open heart surgery. They don't have to take any anti-rejection drugs. So they get the transplant and they're good to go. And again, it can reduce the need for repeated surgeries for children. And we could all understand how this could improve the quality of life of a child. Corneas are another amazing tissue that can be transplanted. They're the main focusing element of the eye. Think of it as almost as like a contact lens. They just take that thin contact lens shaped piece of tissue. While it's not the gift of life, it's the gift of sight. And you can imagine how incredible that must be to wake up and a few days later or a few hours later be able to see with that improved clarity. It's amazing. So those are the types of tissues that can be donated. Now we'll transfer into organ donation. We'll talk about what type of organs can be donated. And before we do that though, we're gonna have another donor family story, and that's of Arnie Zappel and his son Jason.
To kind of tell you a little bit about Jason, he was just really your typical teenage boy. He would wear cut-off jeans. He would wear a baseball cap, but it always wore it with it in the back. And he had lots of friends, and one of the jobs that he had was working at the local movie theater in town. And one of his responsibilities, he and another guy, young man, was to change the movie titles on the marquee. Well, one night when he was going up and hoisted up to the catwalk, they have these little bars. Well, he ended up pulling the bar out, and he fell back, and he fell only about 8.5 feet, but he landed on a cement planter and crushed his brainstem. We got to the hospital and we met with the doctors, came out, and we felt very comfortable and confident that they were doing everything that they possibly could to help Jason survive. Unfortunately, his injuries were too severe, and about 22 hours after he arrived at the hospital, he was declared brain dead. And I recall that my wife and I were brought into this little small room by the nurse from the local organ procurement agency, and we were given choices. Now what was, interesting was the fact that on literally the worst day of our life, Jason had actually made the decision to donate his organs for us, which was the easiest decision that we had to make that night, because we also felt we were honoring his wishes. And so we sat down and we made a selection of what different organs that we were going to donate. We were able to donate, his heart went to a 60-year-old man. We're from Southern California, so the heart went to a 60-year-old man in Los Angeles. And he ended up living, as we found out later, about another 9 years. One of his kidneys went to a 45-year-old man. His kidneys and pancreas went to a 47-year-old man. His corneas went to 2 young men in their 20s. And his liver went to a 66-year-old man in LA that is alive today, literally almost 18 years. He's the one recipient that we have met, and he's a great guy. We just, we really love him, and we become family. He was literally given about a week or so to be able to live, and as the fates would have it, he was the person who was the match, and he was able to get to, at the time, it was UCLA Medical Center, and Jason's liver was being able to transplant into him. Bill is doing wonderful, has a great sense of humor, and really a great outlook on life, which is so wonderful for us because we still feel today that a part of Jason still lives. We don't know much about the other recipients, but we can only hope that they are still doing well or that they had a good quality of life. Jason's decision to be an organ donor actually helped our family begin the healing process. And it brings home the fact that life is precious and we should really live each day to the fullest. After Jason died, my wife and I attended bereavement groups for parents who had lost their children. And one of the things that we would tell our story, but one of the things that became obvious to us was how the other folks who were never given the choice of being able to donate their children's organs, how they continued to struggle and suffer in their grief and loss. As we were going around and we have talked to different groups, and most of our friends know our story, there's been some interesting anecdotes that have come up. And for example, one of our friends just made a comment that he didn't think that his mother would ever want to be an organ donor. And I asked why, and his response was, because she wants to leave this world with the parts that she came into it with. And I recall asking him, well, what if the tables were turned? And what if your mother needed a heart or a liver or a kidney or a pancreas? Would she turn it down because she wanted to leave this world with the parts that she came into with? And he said, no, I'm sure she would accept. And I said, well, where do you think those organs are going to come from? And he shook his head and he said, you're right. I do cherish the memory of Jason's life here on earth, and I'm reminded that we are here on a day-to-day path, and we should appreciate the gift of life that each of us holds within us. And I also want to remember that it's important not to put off important conversations and decisions that we need to make in our life. And I do believe that Jason's life still continues to live on in the lives he saved, and also in the example that he is to others of giving the gift of life.
Thank you, Arnie, for sharing that with us. Another touching story, and it just shows us again how how a wonderful life can live on to provide life to somebody who's in need. One organ donor can save up to 8 lives. So these are the organs that can be transplanted. First we have the heart, then we have the lungs, which can be transplanted 2 at a time, or they can be split and go to different recipients. Surprisingly, the liver can also be split, so the one liver can benefit up to 2 people also. We have the kidneys, and again, they can go to 1 person, or they can be split up to go to 2 people. The pancreas can also be transplanted, and then even intestine can be transplanted too. So one organ donor can save up to 8 lives. So patient identification. Basically in the 70s, when the whole system for organ donation was created, Medicare came up with rules and regulations that allow hospitals to enable organ donation. And they do this by what's called the required referral law. So basically, Medicare says that hospitals have an obligation to identify patients that meet certain criteria. The regulations say that hospitals must report all deaths that have happened, so expired patients, and imminent deaths. Imminent meaning the patient has a severe neurological injury, they're on a ventilator. In Arnie's story, his son had fallen, a severe head injury, and he was on the ventilator. So that's what imminent death is, and we'll talk about that later. And really, the patient's condition and state at the time of referral determines the suitability for donations. The pathways to donation. A patient that suffers a cardiac death where the heart stops, the circulation is lost, and with that, there's no more oxygen flow. Carbon dioxide starts to build up, and with that, organ function is quickly lost. So about 99% of all deaths are cardiac deaths. So this limits the amount of organ donors, but people who die a regular cardiac death, though, can still be evaluated for tissue donations. In the case of Danny Cohen, he passed away a cardiac death, and then he was evaluated for tissue donation. So people who pass away of a regular death can only be evaluated for tissue donation. People who are maintained on a ventilator, though, and have a neurological injury and could progress to brain death, those people can be evaluated for both organ and tissue donation. So what is brain death? Brain death is the irreversible loss of all function to the brain, and specifically the brainstem. When it's declared in the hospital setting, it's a legal time of death. So if a doctor declares brain death and a patient's still on the ventilator, that's their legal time of death in New York State and all across the country. So what that means is, if I was declared brain dead on Friday, but I was kept on the ventilator and donated on Saturday, my time of death would say Friday when I was declared brain dead. When you're declared brain dead, you have no ability to breathe on your own, feel pain, do anything that enables you to be human, to act human. How do the doctors know? It's very rigorous testing. There's a whole bunch of clinical criteria for brain death. Basically, they evaluate your brain stem function. They assess your response to external stimuli, no reflex activity except for spinal cord origin. So they'll go into the room, 2 doctors will test you at separate times. So one doctor will come in, he'll check for all your neurological function. If it's all absent, they proceed to a time period where they wait for up to 6 hours. Then another doctor comes in, he does the same test all over again. The next one is no pupillary response to light. So they open your eyes and they shine a light in, and they see, do your pupils dilate properly? If they don't, then that is an indication of brainstem injury. No corneal reflex, so they'll swab the eye to see if you have a response, to see if you blink. If you don't, again, that's an indication of brainstem damage. And then no ability to breathe off the ventilator. This is the final thing. If both of the exams show no neurological function, what they'll do is they'll disconnect you from the ventilator and they'll watch you and they'll see, does the patient breathe on their own? Now they have ways of testing this. They will give you oxygen beforehand, and they'll take you off the ventilator. And then after a period of 6 to 10 minutes, they plug you back in and they take a blood gas and they see, has the carbon dioxide gone up or has it stayed the same or decreased? If it's gone up, what do you think that indicates? No breathing. And that is the final test that they do to certify brain death. So talking with families, there's 2 types of consent that we need to know about. The first one is first person. This is where you go to the DMV or you go online and you sign up to be an organ donor. So for instance, if something ever happened to me, they would go in and talk to my parents and they would say, Andrew signed up to be an organ donor. These were his wishes. So my wishes guide guide the direction that the organ donation case would go in, just as they did in Arnie's case, where Jason made the decision beforehand. If I never register, though, and I never leave any type of indication about my wishes, then it goes to a hierarchy where the hospital and the organ procurement organization have to figure out who has the legal right to make the decision on the patient's behalf. It really depends on your situation. If you're married, then it would be your spouse. If you're a child, it would be parent. But it goes down a ladder, and the hospital and the organ procurement organization, they figure out who has that legal right. And once they figure that out, that's when they go in to talk to them and ask them about donation. So talking with families, first, we never converse at the bedside. We take the family into a private room. And when we talk to them, the first thing we do is we make sure that they understand brain death. To make sure this happens, when we talk to them, we avoid euphemisms like, your loved one has passed away, or he's in another place, or something like that. We're honest with them, and we give them the options that are on the table. And when we do it, we try to do it in the most caring and compassionate manner possible, because this is the family's decision. We have no right to persuade them. We have no right to make them choose donation. So we want to do it in the most caring and compassionate way possible. And whatever decision they make is their decision. There's no right or wrong decision. If they choose donation, that's great. If not, we respect that decision and thank them for their time, and obviously wish them well, and give our condolences to the family. With that, we'll go into the facts and myths section of this presentation. Number one, donation will cost my family money. Basically, after we have consent from the family for an organ or tissue donor, our organization is responsible for any cost thereafter. The second myth is donation is against my religion. A lot of religions consider donation as an act of charity, an act of love. Some consider it almost as an obligation to your fellow man. If you have the opportunity to save someone's life through donation when you leave this world, it's almost an obligation to give that to your fellow man. The third one, donation delays funeral and prevents an open casket. While donation doesn't delay the funeral, and you can have an open casket as long as you wish, tissue donation, you can restrict what you want to donate. So you don't have to give bone, you don't have to give skin. It's all up to the patient and the family. For organ donors, the body is treated with respect and dignity at all times. It's done just like a regular surgery, so the incision is no different. The fourth myth is I'm too old to donate. The oldest donor we have on record is 96 years old, and certain organs tolerate aging better than others. So the liver and kidney specifically, they age very well, and a liver, say from an 80-year-old person, might give somebody younger 10 or more years of life. So age is never ever a rule out for donation. 5, the myth is my medical care will suffer if I'm signed up as a donor. It's completely false. The main reason is because your healthcare provider has no way of knowing that you're a donor. At emergency scenes, you don't check your wallet for a donor card. At the hospital, they have no records. They have no way they can check into that information. The only organization that has access to that information is my organization or an organ procurement organization. So the hospital only knows that you're registered as a donor when we tell them, and we will only communicate that to the hospital when we know that a patient has died or will potentially pass away of brain death. Celebrities and wealthy people can get transplants more quickly. The way that transplants are handled, a third-party system handles them. So say there is an organ donor at Kingston Hospital, we would work up the patient after we got consent from the family, and we would find out which organs are suitable for transplant. Say that the kidneys and liver were both good for transplant. We would give that information to the third party, which is called the United Network for Organ Sharing, and they would handle all of the organ allocation. And they go through the waiting list for respective organs, and they go through several complicated formulas. So there's no way possible that income, celebrity status, ethnicity, anything like that can affect the way an organ is allocated. 7, if I donate, recipients will get my family's contact information and cause them more grief. This is false also. The Center for Donation and Transplant, they encourage donor families and recipients to communicate if they're willing, but there is no obligation. If a donor family does not want to communicate with a recipient, then that's their choice, and they won't ever receive information from the recipient. And likewise, if the recipient doesn't want to communicate with the donor family, they can say that, and we respect their wishes, and we keep the donor family's information from going to them. So it has to be a collaborative type of thing. The donor family and the recipient, they both have to be willing to communicate. Number 8, if I donate, they'll take everything. You can choose what organs or tissues you want to donate, so you can limit it to whatever you want. So if you just wanted to donate your heart, you could do that. If you just wanted to donate bone, you can do that. It's totally up to you. You can donate for transplantation and research, or you can just donate for transplantation only, or you could just donate for research only. So it's totally up to you. You have total power over that decision, and we respect your wishes no matter what. Number 9, this is a common one. If I sign the back of my license, that's good enough, right? It's a definite myth because, like I said before, you don't go into your wallet looking for your donor card. You don't go into your wallet looking to check the back of your license to see if it's signed. What happens is when we get a referral from a hospital, what we do is we take your information and we type into our system, and we can check the database to see if you're a registered donor. So the only way we can get that information is if you actually sign up either at the DMV or online and make it official. So signing the back of your license is a very unreliable way of endorsing your wishes of being an organ donor. Now we'll go to donor aftercare and support. The first thing is that the families receive, organ donor and tissue donor families receive an aftercare packet, typically within 6 weeks of donation. If the hospital participates in our donor flag program, they'll receive a flag. What the flag program is, as Deb was talking about, if there's an organ or tissue donor, the hospital, Margaretville in this instance, they will fly a Donate Life flag for the donor for 1 week in honor of the donations. It's a great way for the hospital to say, thank you for your wonderful gift, and to recognize them publicly for the gift of life that they've given to others. So the families will receive that. They'll receive bereavement material. We give them donor medals and special keepsake boxes. And there's tons of material in there to help them get started on their life without their loved one, and to continue on with donation if it's something that they're interested in. There's information about how to make a patch for the donor quilt if the family is interested in that, and it's just a unique and touching way to memorialize their loved one. We also have community events that all donor families are invited to, and then we also have a volunteer program. So people, a lot of them think that volunteering is the best way they can truly give back to the person that gave them the gift of life. So we have a lot of volunteer activity. Some of the quick takeaways from this: talk to your family or friends about your last wishes. Donation isn't a conversation we should put off. Complete your advance directives if you have them. If you have a living will or healthcare proxy, specify your wishes. Sign up on the Donate Life New York State Registry. You can do this at the DMV. You can go onto our website, donatelifecdt.org. We also have a phone number there, 1-800-256-7811. New York State also has an online system now. It's called MyDMV. You can go to newyork.gov, and you can find this information. We'll just end with some quick numbers here. The impact in need of donation, the gift of life. The trends for organ donation, as you see here, these blue bars, or the number of people waiting for transplants continues to go up. Right now it's over 110,000, but every year, as we can see here, the number of transplants is flat, it's not growing. So we have an increasing problem. More people waiting for organs, but the same supply. So organ donation is a very rare thing. About 75% of families that are in the situation to say yes, do say yes. It's just a problem. There's not many brain deaths. So the only way we can maximize the gift of life to bring this number up, to bring this down, is to just make sure that whoever is interested in becoming an organ donor registers. A few more numbers to close with. One organ or tissue donor can benefit at least 50 lives. Last year in our service area, 129 lives were saved through organ transplants alone. There were at least 500,000 tissue transplants in 2011. Every 14 minutes someone's added to the waiting list. So during this presentation, there could be 2 to 3 or 4 people that went on that waiting list. And you can kind of put yourself in their shoes and say, what must it be like to be in this situation where you have to say to yourself, for me to live, somebody else has to either pass away or altruistically donate to me. And currently in New York State, there's over 9,700 people waiting for organs. It could be your neighbors or your loved ones, people in your family who are waiting for that life-saving gift. Right now, New York State is 47th out of 50 states in terms of their registry. Less than 20% of New York State's adults over 18 are registered to donate. And we can and we need to do better. We just need to get out there and make the decision to give the gift of life. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.